In this video, I'm going to be talking about computer storage. If it is that you need to know anything at all about computer storage, this is the video that you need to check out. I'm going to be covering floppy disk all the way to where we are now, which is NVMe SSD, the latest storage technology. The video really is targeting those persons who may be doing a computer basics course. You may also be doing a computer repair course, such as the CompTIA A+ certification, where you need to know about computer storage. Or it may be that you are doing a computer course here in the Caribbean, for instance, the information technology CSEC course. You need to check this video out. Alright, I'm going to be covering everything that you need to know about storage. Alright, my name is Roger, and let's jump right into the video. The first thing that we're going to be looking at is what really is storage. So storage really is any media which stores information permanently. Now, storage is needed because, obviously we need information or data for future use. So there must be some way of retaining this information. So if we need to have access to it tomorrow or next week or next year, for instance, we will be able to have access to it. Additionally, storage is needed because we have these things that are installed on a device, software, the same things that are referred to as apps, and they need to be on the device. Well, yes, there are some apps that we use as SaaS, that's SaaS, that's software as a service, meaning that we access them online, we use them online. For instance, the Microsoft 365 app is one of those such ones. But generally, the apps are typically installed on the device that we're using. It is important that we make a distinction between a storage device and storage media. So let's look at that now. Storage media really is the physical material on which data or information and instructions are stored. So when we talk about storage media, we're looking at things such as the memory card or a DVD or a Blu-ray. Those are examples of storage media. Now, storage devices are the mechanisms that are used to read and to write to a storage medium. And of course, medium is singular and media is plural. Some examples of a storage device would be a thumb drive or a USB drive, and also a DVD drive or a Blu-ray drive. Okay, so those are examples of storage devices, and that is really the difference between storage media and storage device. Next, we're going to be looking at the benefits of computer storage over memory. The first benefit or advantage is that computer storage is permanent. So we know that whatever we put in memory, whatever we store on memory is there temporarily. So for instance, if you shut down the computer or the laptop, whatever it would have been in memory would have been lost. If you're using a desktop computer, for instance, electricity is not connected to a UPS, the electricity supply goes out, whatever is in memory would be lost. The thing now is that with computer storage, once you store it there, so you put some files, let's just say on a thumb drive or a memory card, you come back tomorrow, it is still there. Additionally, computer storage has a greater storage capacity than that of memory. So look at it. You go to Amazon, for instance, look at the average laptop there. So you'll see, for instance, storage in an average laptop being, say, 1 terabyte storage, whereas for the memory may be something like about 16 gigabytes of RAM or 32 gigabytes of RAM or 8 gigabytes of RAM. Portability is another benefit of storage over memory, and it is that with the storage devices, so something like a thumb drive, we can store our files on a thumb drive and we can move around with them. We can move from one place to another with them. Okay, this is something that one is not able to do with memory. Also, they are more cost effective. So if you were to do a price comparison between memory and storage, you'll find that storage actually costs less per unit. So look at the cost of memory. So you can go to Amazon website, for instance, look at the cost of, let's just say, 8 gig stick DDR4 RAM. Look at the cost of that and measure that with, say, the cost of a 1 terabyte external hard drive. Now, in terms of the categories of storage, there are different categories of storage, and the categories really come about because, guess what? There are different technology, and we continue to evolve. So this is really what really causes a paradigm shift, the fact that we continue to evolve technologically. So earlier on, we would have started out with magnetic technology, and with this type of technology, it is that the device, well, not the device, but the medium, so whether it's something like a floppy disk or magnetic tape or hard disk drive, the surface of the medium is actually coated with a magnetically sensitive material, and data are stored by magnetizing the microscopic particles on the surface of the media. And this is really how the information, the data that are stored on these media are actually accessed, right, or read. Then we have optical storage, and this now, it differs from magnetic storage, or magnetic devices, in the sense that with optical, it is a laser beam that is used to read and write to a disk. And then now we have solid state storage, and this is where we are now in terms of technology. This is where we are. So we would have evolved magnetic technology, the floppy disk, the magnetic tape, the hard disk drive. They're all now obsolete. Also, optical technology is also obsolete. So with solid state technology, data is stored and written to the medium electronically. Now we're going to be looking now at each category in a little bit more detail, and the first two, which are floppy disk and magnetic tape, I'm not going to really spend much time with them because they're really obsolete. Just to say that the floppy disk is square in nature. The storage capacity maxes out at 1.4 megabytes. Can you imagine that? It is so small in terms of storage capacity that even nowadays, in 2022, you would not be able to fit one track from an album on a floppy disk. Can you imagine that? So they are pretty much obsolete. And the other thing is that the magnetic tape, it was, back in the days, it was primarily used for backup purposes. So enterprises would typically use this to back up their data, their information. And the tape would actually be on what is referred to as a spool. So it would be wounded around a spool. So let us look at the hard disk drive. Let us begin by looking at the platter. And the platter is another name for disk. The platter would typically be metal. So it is as you are seeing it here. And yeah, so next, the read and write head. Now the names here describe exactly what it does. So this component, so the read and write head, is actually at the tip here of this mechanism. If I go over here, if you look here, this will give you a better view of the read and write head. So that is it right there. And what it does, the read head is what would actually read the information that is on the surface of the disk, and the write head is what now would record to the disk. Of course, these are for the connections of the drive to the motherboard. Then you have the actuator, And the actuator now would be the motor, because this is all mechanical. And yeah, so the actuator is essentially the motor which controls this entire mechanism here, which is the actuator arm and the actuator axis. So the actuator arm, of course, it has the read and write head, and it is what actually moves into position as the disk is being written to and read from, for the drive to be able to access the information based on where the information is stored. And of course you have the spindle here, and the spindle is the component that actually houses, it actually holds rather, the disk in place. So this is really the internal structure of the hard disk drive. This will give you a better view of the read and write head there. Alright, so how are data stored on a hard disk drive? I would have alluded to this a little bit earlier in terms of the fact that, you know, magnetic particles are coated on the surface of the disk, and you know that is a big part of the process. Now, in terms of file organization, what you're looking at here reflects how data or information would be stored on the surface of a disk. These are three different organizations here to describe that process. So one is that the files, they are stored in tracks, and the tracks are actually circular. So those circular areas that you're looking at there, so for instance, this here, this contiguous area here, that's a track. This also is another track. And notice that the track, it is somewhat comparable to, you know, the track that you have on a track field that you run around. And notice too that the tracks, they do not ever meet. So each track is separate from the other. The sector now would be actually it's actually a region, yes, on the track, and it is the smallest physical area in which data is stored on the disk. The size is typically fixed to, what is it, 512 bytes. All right, and then now we have clusters, and it is that a group of sectors actually now would actually form to give us what is referred to as a cluster. And even think about the term cluster. When you think about a term cluster, you're thinking about multiple items that, for instance, are confined to a particular region. Okay. Then we have another file structure, which is the cylinder, and this diagram illustrates that. So with a cylinder now, with this concept, it is actually referring to the same area, so the same sector, the same track on multiple disks. All right, so now in terms of storage capacity, if you notice here, I have two sizes here. So we have the 2.5 inch and the 3.5 inch disk. That is what those are actually referring to. The thing is, when you look at something like a hard a laptop, actually, do you notice that the laptop is actually smaller? Yes, in terms of form factor, the laptop is normally more compact than, let us say, a desktop computer, and as such, all the components that you find in a laptop, you would find them also in a desktop computer. It is just that they are much smaller, right? They use much smaller form factors. And the same principle applies to the hard disk drive. So the hard disk drive that is found in a laptop, the diameter is 2.5 inches, and the one for the desktop computer, the hard disk drive for the desktop computer, is 3.5 inches in diameter. Now, in terms of the storage capacity, currently for the laptop hard drive, it ranges somewhere between 500 gigabytes to about 5 terabytes thereabout. And for the desktop computers, Similarly, 500 gigabytes to 20 terabytes max. Max is out at 20 terabytes. But as I mentioned before, remember I mentioned before that with the hard disk drive, they're basically, being phased out now. We're in the transition, moving on to SSDs. And really and truly, the 500 gig hard drives are not really all that available anymore. So it may be that you may find the larger sizes being much more available on the market. Alright, so that really is looking at the hard disk drive. And let's just look at some pros and cons of the hard disk drive. For one, it is non-volatile. Non-volatile meaning that whatever you store on the hard disk drive would be there in the future. Alright? Come on. Alright, and this is particularly important because remember, that something like the operating system would have to be stored on that device that would offer some permanency. Because when you switch on the device, let's just say the computer or the desktop, the laptop or the desktop, tomorrow, when you switch it on, the operating system must be housed in such a way that when it goes through after it goes through the booting process, the memory should be able to it's supposed to be able to be fetched from the hard drive, the permanent storage, and then placed into memory for it to be used, because the operating system is actually used in memory, but obviously it can't be stored in memory because memory is temporary. All right, the cost factor is another plus here, and this is in comparison now with, when you compare this now with like the SSDs. The SSDs, they are more modern. We're now in 2022. They've been on the market for a while, but not all that common. Yes, if you're going to purchase a new system, a new laptop, for instance, you're going to find that it will come with a SSD and not with a hard drive. And so the hard disk drives are more cost effective. They're cheaper. All right. The storage capacities of the hard disk drives are also quite huge. So notice in this slide before, notice that I mentioned that for the desktop computers that they max out at 20 terabyte, and for the laptops roughly 5 terabytes or about. Now for the current SSDs, they do not go up to as much as 20 terabytes. And even if we were to have in 2022 a SSD that goes up to that size, I mean, the cost would be so huge to be like crazy. And of course, they are portable, so they can be transported here and there. So you find that a lot of persons will have something like an external hard drive that they use as backup storage. You can easily move around with that. The data transfer rate, not too bad. And this is really comparing it with, say, the data transfer rate of, let us say, something like a CD drive or a DVD drive, right? Much faster than those. Now, on the downside, the hard drives are susceptible to crashes, I tell you. Let me just say that if you have a laptop, right, this more so applies to those persons with laptops. If you have a laptop, more so one of those older ones, and the laptop is on, if you move around with the laptop, it is highly likely that the hard drive may crash, because remember, the hard disk drive, it has moving parts. It is mechanical in nature, that has moving parts, and if it is on and you're moving it around, you can end up with something like a head crash. Now with the head crash, let me go back to our previous slide here. Alright, so remember I mentioned that this is a read and write head, and the read and write head, it just hovers a couple of micro what inches, is it? Above the surface of the disk. It may actually look like it touches the surface of the disk, but it actually does not. So it does not make any physical contact with the surface of the disk. Okay. The thing though is that if the system is on, the laptop is on, for instance, or if you may be even using something like an external hard drive, but let's just say it is on, and you move that in an erratic way, you can actually cause it to crash. And when it crashes, what happens is that the read and write head actually makes physical contact with the platter. So it actually digs into the surface of the platter, And that no is where, because that is trouble. That is big trouble, because guess what? The read and write head is a part, yes, of the actuator arm, and it is supposed to move in position to be able to access the information, the data, based on where it is stored in the disk. Yeah. All right. So when you end up with a head crash, you'll hear, when you turn on the system, you like your laptop or an external hard drive, you will hear, for instance, click, 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 click. All right, I guess some persons are laughing like wow right now. All right, so you'll get typically get that sound coming from it, and right away you know that, yeah, big trouble. Okay, and especially if you don't have your data backed up, why I tell you, in big trouble, because everything on that will be lost. All right, the noise factor. So I mentioned that it is mechanical. So yes, you have that noise factor, and if you have multiple hard disk drives in a desktop, for instance, it can really be quite excessive. The power consumption, it does consume a lot of power, especially when you compare this now to newer drives. For instance, the SSD, the power consumption for the SSDs is far less. Heat is another element. Remember, again, it is mechanical. It generates a lot of heat. And again, if you have multiple hard disk drives in a system unit, right, then the heat can be quite high. All right. Speed is a factor when you compare it with more modern technology, the SSD again. All right, you're gonna find that the hard disk drive, will be less of a competitor where speed is concerned. All right, so let's just really looking at the hard disk drive, the pros and the cons of the hard disk drive. Now let us move now to look at optical storage. And as I mentioned before, with optical storage, data is actually read from and recorded to a disk using light. So this is a laser light that actually does that. The data is stored in pits and lands, and we're going to be looking at the surface of a disk shortly. All right, so here we go. So this is what it looks, and this of course would have been blown up, so this is really a microscopic view of the surface of a disk. Certainly if you were to look at the disk with the naked eye, you wouldn't be able to see what we're looking at here. All right, so the pits would be those depressions there, and the lands would be the upper areas. So these are the areas in which data would be stored. Now let us look at a comparison. Let's just do a comparison now of the different types of optical disc, and I have here 3. So we have the CD, DVD, and the Blu-ray disc. Now in terms of storage capacity, the CD, it maxes out at 700 megabytes. No, definitely the thing is that not all CDs will be this capacity. If you look, for instance, if you're a student, you have, like sometimes you purchase some text books, and at the back of the book you'll find a supplementary CD that has material for the related book, to complement the book. And you flip that into the drive, you'll notice that if you look at the capacity, the storage capacity, you may realize that it actually is less than 700 megabytes. Alright, so 700 megabytes here is really the max. Now for the DVD, the standard size is 4.7 gigabytes. And then we have the dual layer DVD, which you're looking at 8.5 or 9.4 gigabytes. Now with the dual layer DVDs is actually, I tell you, technology is really something. So basically they are actually able to create another layer on the surface of the disk, and that is how the capacity, they're able to increase the storage capacity. The Blu-ray standard 25 gigs, and then you have the dual layer which maxes at 50 gigabytes. The thing is, I should say that when you look at the different types of data, so you have data that comes in text form, graphics, images, you have software. All of these different types of data can be stored on each of these optical drives, optical storage, right? The CD, DVD, and Blu-ray. So you can put any of these. You can put text on them. You can put, you can store software on them, and so forth. The thing though is that each is designed for a particular type of data, right? So each is really enhanced for a particular type of data. The CD is designed primarily for audio content. The DVD and Blu-ray, on the other hand, are really designed for movies. Now, I should say that, I don't know if you're wondering, then, if you have DVD, then why do we need to have Blu-ray? No, this is because of the fact that, would have had increase now in the quality of the movies, for instance. So, we now have, for instance, UHD, right? Ultra high definition, right? Moving up from high definition. So you have different video formats, and because of that, now the videos, the movies, they would actually take up more space, hence the need for something like a Blu-ray disc. Now they use a laser to burn the data onto the surface of the disc, and that's the latest. Well, you also have a laser that reads from the disc, and there are different colors. I should say too that if you were to take all of them, if you were to take one each, if you were to take a CD, a DVD, and a Blu-ray and put them together, you'll find that the dimensions, they're the same size in terms of physical dimension. But how what happened is that they're able to store more data on, say, a DVD over a CD, because the laser lens actually gets smaller as you move up the line. So the laser lens that a DVD uses is actually much smaller than that used by a CD. The lens used by a Blu-ray is actually much smaller than that used in a DVD. Okay, and of course there are different formats for each type of media. So you have, for the CD, you have CD-R, CD-ROM, CD-RW. Now R means recordable, and these now would be, I don't know, based on your age, if you know these things, but back in the days when we used to burn CDs, you would go to the store to buy blank CDs, and they would be labeled CD-R, meaning that they would be recordable. That means you can actually copy to them. But typically after you copy to them, that is it. So they are really, you can actually only copy to them once, but you can read from them multiple times. Read only, that's what ROM means. And these now would be, for instance, remember earlier I made mention to those CDs that you may get with your text. Those are read only. So they come already with information. RW means that the device, well, not the device, but the media can actually be rewritten to multiple times. Alright, and the same principle applies to the others. DL here, it means dual layer. So the capacity is actually roughly twice the capacity, well, roughly twice the normal capacity. Alright, moving on. So, the question before I bring up, what is to come next, let me ask the question. If you put a Blu-ray disc in, let us say a Blu-ray, if you put a Blu-ray disc in a CD drive, will it work? What do you think? So it is important that we discuss this thing called backward and forward compatibility. Okay, now what basically this is saying is that if a device is backward compatible, it means that those related items that were created before it can work with the current technology. However, whatever is created in the future typically cannot work with what was created before. Okay, we have a great shift in the technology. So where am I going with all of this? So if you have a CD can work in a DVD drive. A CD can also work in a Blu-ray drive. And of course, to be able to access a CD, a DVD, or a Blu-ray, they have to be used in a drive, which is what you're looking at here. Of course, for the laptop, it will be much slimmer. But even though they're the same physical dimension, if you were to take a DVD that is the disc and put it into a CD drive, it would not work. Even though it fits in the slot, it would not work because the DVD is not backward compatible with a CD drive. So remember I mentioned that typically what is created in the future, in a lot of situations you find that they are not compatible with what would have been created before. Okay, as we're seeing here. So with a Blu-ray disc drive, you can use a CD in it, you can use a DVD in it, and of course, yes, you can use, it is designed for a Blu-ray disc. Okay, but a CD drive, for a CD drive, it would not be able to work with a DVD, nor would it be able to work with a Blu-ray disc. For the pros and cons now of an optical disc and the drive, they typically very inexpensive. So if you were to compare something like a CD or a DVD with a hard disk drive, I mean, come on, there's no comparison, right? CDs, I don't even know if, well, I guess they're still on the market, yes, but they're dirt cheap, right? And yes, they are portable. Now, in terms of the disadvantages, if it is CD-ROM, it means that you cannot change anything on the disk. The access speed, again, very slow. Look at these drives here. They're quite bulky. So these are actually desktop drives. See how big they are? And yeah, the storage capacities are limited. So think again about that CD, it maxes out at 700 megabytes. Look at the DVD, regular DVD that maxes out at 4.7 gigabytes. Right? Yeah. Look here. I mean, look at even games nowadays. A typical game nowadays will be running about 20-30 gigabytes in size. Right? So you see that a DVD really would not help you here. All right. So they have limited storage capacity, and they're also, oh my gosh, prone to scratches. So this was like a headache when we used to use them a lot. They would easily get scratched. And when they get scratched, you flip them into the drive, you'd find that they may not necessarily work. All right, so we are at the last device looking at solid state storage, and again, you notice that the technology differs among each type of storage. So with the solid state storage here now, the data is written to it and read from it electronically, and this uses a type of memory comparative to the EEPROM memory. That's electrically erasable, programmable, read-only memory. The solid state drive, it has no moving parts, so it is solid state. So hence the name solid state. So it's a block of memory, right? And it is non-volatile, which means that you put it there, it remains there unless you choose to delete it. And of course, the memory blocks are made of integrated circuits. All right, so here we have a lovely chart looking at the different types of solid state drives. So everybody should be pretty much familiar with this one, which is a thumb drive, same thing as the USB drive. All right, so yeah, so we have the thumb drive, SSD, SATA SSD, MSATA. We have M.2 SATA, we have M.2 PCIe, and the M.2 NVMe. What does all of this mean? You might be wondering. And let me just say that, you know, you don't need to panic where this is concerned. You know, where this is concerned, it does take a bit of time getting to know the different terms, especially if, you know, these are things that you do not encounter on a daily basis. So, you know, it may mean too that, you know, it will take some deliberate effort on your part to get to know them. All right, so in terms of cost, the thumb drive, we are relatively cheap. So you can get even a 1 terabyte thumb drive for what? Probably about $20 US, $20 plus US, they're about $30 plus US. They're relatively cheap. All right. I didn't put any cost for these because, you know, they're different sizes. You know, it will be a headache. So they're different sizes, and the thing too is that for each size the price differs. You know, but what I would encourage you to do, what you can do too, is to go over to Amazon. Go over to Amazon's website. You can actually, you know, do a search to look at the different types of solid state drives and the, you know, different sizes and cost. All right, but certainly the NVMe and NVMe, that's non-volatile memory express. Non-volatile memory express SSD, and this is really the latest technology, the latest storage, that is, and it is the most expensive. What you find too is that because they're so expensive, the size, there's actually a cap on the sizes. So essentially the storage capacities right now really caps out at about 2 terabytes. Right, and remember what I was saying earlier about the hard disk drive, that you can get a hard disk drive up to 20 terabytes. All right, now in terms of the data transfer speed, the data transfer speed is really the speed, the time that it takes to transfer data, for instance, from one device to another, or from one location to another. Look here, you see how fast this is? This is like 15.75 gigabits to 31.5 gigabits per second transfer speed. Look at this in comparison to the thumb drive. So the 3.1 version 3.1 USB drive, it caps out at 10 gigabits per second. All right, and this now gives you an idea of the type of connection. So how this is connected to the device that it is a part of. So typically, you know, all of us know about the thumb drive already, that it connects to a USB port. The SATA now, that's slender, typically red cable. PCIe, typically the PCIe, I tell you, this is a revolution, because the PCIe, primarily this would be used for things like an add-on graphics card or sound card. Okay, so what they basically did was to integrate the memory technology with this type of interface. So basically what you're looking at here, you know, when we talk about PCIe and NVMe and SATA, these are the interfaces that is referring to how the drive is connected to the device. All right, so that is basically an overview of the different types of solid state drives. Let me just add to that, for the MSATA, this module is really more so designed. Notice that the form factor, that it is much smaller than the M.2 ones, and that is because they are more so designed for a laptop, right? The M here meaning mini, so that's mini SATA SSD. Now, in terms of the pros and cons of SSDs, yeah, there's no comparison between the read and write speed and, you know, previous storage devices. Also, the power consumption, as I mentioned before when I was talking about the hard drive, gosh, yeah, they use like less wattage. Also, the lifespan much longer when you compare this with, say, a hard disk drive. Because remember, you know, the hard disk drive, it has moving parts, mechanical parts, and they can get worn out. You can have head disk crashes and so forth. All right. Plus, they are affected by environmental conditions such as heat. So they are quicker. Right, so you're looking at, if you're into gaming, if you're an avid gamer, for instance, or if you're running some servers, you know, you have SSDs being your primary storage, you're gonna find that, you know, the games will perform that much faster. You're gonna find that the boot up time for the device, whether it's a laptop, desktop, server, is gonna be that much faster. All right, and the form factors, referring to the size of the module. Notice the form factor, because these, you know, they're actually very small. If you're familiar with a gum stick, for instance, you know, chewing gum, they are actually the size of one of those gum sticks, to show how small they are. Right, so they're very slender, and having these in the systems, in a desktop, for instance, or in a laptop, it means that there can be better airflow. It means too that, you know, they can make the devices even that much smaller, right? All right, and of course they are quieter because they are not mechanical. They don't make any noise. Now, on the downsides, they are expensive, as I mentioned to you before. And yes, the size is really an issue right now. You know, new technology, the cost to manufacture them quite high, you know, but as we progress through time, you're going to find that the costs are going to go down, and you're going to find that we're going to be able to get larger sizes. All right, then we're moving to cloud storage. So I mean, come on, we have all been using cloud storage, isn't that so? All right, so cloud storage is really just storage. Cloud refers to the internet. You know that we tend to live now in a virtual space. You know, we tend to rely a lot on the internet for different things, for services, for instance, to purchase consumables, to watch movies, for entertainment, to game, and so forth. Right. Similarly too, the internet is used to store files remotely. So no longer do we need, you have a business, for instance, you don't need to go out and purchase some expensive servers for data storage and so forth, and to have your power contingencies and, you know, security systems. No, right? You can simply pay a monthly subscription fee and you can access storage online. So that is really what cloud storage is all about. Let me add too, I realize that not many persons really think about it this way, but there are a whole host of companies that offer cloud storage services. Google is one, right? So you may have heard about Google Drive. Now, when you go to Google's data centers, when you go inside there, you're going to see them having like a whole lot of data servers. When you look in the servers, you're going to find that they have hard drives there. It is our data. So when we store our information online, with say Google or any other entity that offers the service, the information, the files, they are stored on hard drives. Yeah, man. Okay, so it comes back to hard drive. All right, so that is really an overview of cloud storage. And let me just mention too, well, let me leave that for the last slide. I'm going to leave that for the last slide. But let me just say here that when we store files online, the files are actually stored off-site. Off-site, meaning that they're not stored at the location, you know, where your primary location where you may be working from. Yes, so some examples of cloud storage providers. You know, if you have an email account, you know, your email provider, service provider would be offering you that service. Because typically, you know, like for instance, if you're with Gmail, the standard size that you get is what, 15 gigabytes thereabout. Free storage. You know, of course, if you want to have additional, you know, storage size, then, you know, you would have to subscribe for that service. All right, so these are a list of entities that offer cloud storage services. Now, just to wrap up, let me just add that in terms of these terms here now, so you may be hearing about internal hard disk drive and external hard disk drive. You may be wondering, what is that? So let me explain. So an internal hard disk drive would be one that is housed in a laptop or in a desktop computer or in a server. Whereas an external hard disk drive is one now that is encased. It has a housing that it is in, and it is outside of a laptop, for instance, or a desktop computer. Okay, and typically we use these for backup. Access speed is really referring to how much time it takes the drive to locate data or files that are stored on it. And then we have data transfer rate, and this is really important. The data transfer rate is really how much time it takes to transfer data. So for instance, you may be copying a file from, let us say, a thumb drive to the storage in your laptop or desktop. How much time does that take? And notice that I mentioned earlier of USB 3.1. The version, one of the things about the different versions is that each version is defined also by the transfer rate, the data transfer rate. All right. RPM stands for rotation per minute, and this is really applicable to let me see here now, hard disk drive. So if you go to purchase a hard disk drive, we're still going that route here now in 2022, or almost at the end of 2022. Guess what? The hard drives typically would come in what, 3 different rotations specifications. So you have 5,000, what is it, 5,200 RPM, you have 7,200 RPM, and you have 10,000 RPM the rotation per minute, which means that how much time does the disk rotate. Remember, you know, that for the information to be accessed or to be written, for the disk to be written to, it has to be rotating. So just imagine the disk spinning 10,000 times per minute. Can you count from 1 to 10,000 in 1 minute? Oh my. All right, so you have a sense of what is happening there. And so if the faster the disk rotates, also it is the faster it is able, the drive is able to access the information or to write to the disk. Okay. On average, most drives would be about 5,200. Did I say 5,200 RPM? I believe it's 5,400 RPM. And not 5,200 RPM, but that's the standard size that most hard disk drives would come in. All right, and they typically would cost less. So if you're going to be purchasing a hard disk drive that has an RPM of 10,000, you know, it's going to cost much more money. In terms of capacity, when we talk about storage size or storage capacity, we're talking about how much data the drive can hold or the media can hold. So for instance, if we look at a DVD, standard size 4.7 gigabytes. Okay, or if you're going to purchase let's just say an external hard drive, you may be thinking about something like a 2 terabytes. So that is the size. All right, so the capacity is really referring to the size. Now when we talk about something like buffer, the buffer is typically a form of memory that is embedded on the drive, and it acts as a kind of a temporary storage during data transfer. So typically it comes into play when you have input output taking place. And then we have cache. And cache is typically used in the reading and writing process, right? So you find that cache is also a part of the processor. All right, so that is it. Quite a bit of information. Yes, I hope you found the information to be quite useful nevertheless, you know. And of course it does require that you go through the presentation multiple times so that you really get the full understanding of what I would have said here. All right, so I'm going to invite you to subscribe to my channel if you have not yet done so, and to also hit that notification bell so that when I upload new videos you will be automatically notified. For me to also share the videos so that others can also get value from the videos. All right, so I am Roger. See you again in the next video. Take care.